Brazil has had a history of frequent and large fluctuations in economic growth. While the country has had large periods of huge economic growth, it is currently in its largest downturn since 1930. Its GDP growth of negative 5.9% is a record low. Its unemployment rate of 6.1%, while close to full employment, shows disparity between skilled and unskilled workers. Brazil's inflation rate is extremely high at 10.36% and is steadily rising. These economic problems combine into a recession that has lasted several years and was caused by the combination of political turmoil, business corruption, and a largely self-reliant economy. From 2011 to 2015, only 11.5% of Brazil's GDP came from foreign trade. Part of this low value stems from Brazil's association with Mercosur, the customs union Brazil formed with Argentina, Uruguay, and Paraguay in 1991. The members of Mercosur agreed to negotiate future free trade agreements as a bloc by maintaining a common external tariff as well as a single internal tariff. This agreement has had the intention of expanding Brazil's manufacturing base in a protected but larger market. However, it has completely prevented Brazil from negotiating individual trade agreements with more vibrant economies. Other countries in Latin America, while also facing cooling economies, are expected to grow between 2 and 4% this year, yet Brazil is forecasted to experience an economic contraction because of its lack of diversified markets. Because this economic recession can be traced back so far, it is clear that the lack of globalization in Brazil needs to be a focus for fighting the economic contraction. Brazil's economy has been hard hit the last few years, and it is predicted the economy will continue shrinking 2.3% by the end of the year. A major part of this shrinking GDP is due to the decrease in net exports. To the CIA, Brazil's exports of goods and services is 14.9%, while its imports surpass that, coming in at 15.4%, meaning that its net exports is negative 1.5%. So how did this problem manifest itself in a country whose economy was booming just a decade ago? For one, the bribery case of the Petrobras oil company ruined the company, which was a major contributor to exports. Oil prices plummeted, really hurting Brazil. Yet, the major explanation is in Brazil's lack of globalization, more specifically, its lack of diversification in trading partners. Starting 1 decade ago, Brazil decided to take advantage of China's newly booming economy. Exports grew from 118 billion to 256 billion in just 7 years. Very quickly, China became Brazil's biggest trade partner, which helped it to grow for a few years. Its success relied heavily on feeding the commodity exports, which were highly demanded in China. Unfortunately, as Brazil's agricultural sectors grew and began leading in world exports of soy, sugar, meat, coffee, and orange juice, the country began to abandon its manufacturing industries. In the last few years, as China's economic growth slowed, Brazil would soon realize its mistake in excessive dependency of commodity exports to one country. The problem is that commodity prices are very unstable, and when they fall, economies are hard hit. To make things worse, Brazil had now given up its ground on industries like manufacturing, infrastructure, research and development, education, high technology, and equipment development, all crucial to sustainability, but now displaced in the world market by countries like China. Today, 19.1% of Brazilian exports continue to go to China, demonstrating that lack of diversification continues to be an issue. The commodity boom of Brazil has highlighted another issue of globalization, immigration reform. As the country transitioned to commodity-based exporter, it suffered a brain drain where professionally educated specialists who previously worked in research and technology fields left the country. Today, as Brazil makes the effort to reestablish other industries, it is still lacking in workers to fill the voids in these specialized fields. Though Brazil's unemployment rate is relatively normal at 6.5%, it is extremely difficult to grow an economy on unskilled industries alone. In 2014, Brazil's Strategic Affairs Minister Marcelo Neri announced that there would be changes made to the country's immigration policies to encourage skilled immigrants to fill the shortage in certain job sectors. In an increasingly globalized world, it is important for Brazil to welcome skilled immigrants who could add to their economy by opening up new sectors and diversifying their economy. As the Secretary of Strategic Affairs Ricardo Paes de Barro says, In a globalized world, we not only need the flow of goods and services, but also the flow of minds. Brazil's lack of globalization continues to be a prominent issue, and if not fixed, will result in continued economic turmoil for future Brazilian generations. So why is Brazil struggling so much to globalize? Remember earlier we told you about Brazil's association with Mercosur, the customs union in 1991 represented the beginnings of its isolationist economy. So why can't Brazil just open its doors and begin trading with other countries now? This all has to do with the problem of inflation. Currently, Brazil's CPI index is at 4,550.23. The CPI index in Brazil has been continually increasing since 1995, showing a huge increase in inflation. The inflation rate in Brazil is currently at 10.36%. Compared to the United States inflation rate of 1.4%, we see that Brazil's inflation is completely out of control. This has many negative effects on the economy. In general, an increased inflation rate decreases the spending power of the currency, and so decreases the aggregate demand. This also has a huge effect on foreign trade. Because the Brazilian currency is becoming worth less and less, foreign countries are less likely to do trade with Brazil. This is one of the major problems in Brazil that has made it impossible for it to globalize. Every year since 2005, Brazil's central bank has set a target inflation rate of 4.5%. This target rate has obviously not kept Brazil on track. Many people attribute this to the fact that Brazil has one of the few central banks that is not formally independent from the government. Brazil has had a long history of postponing any fiscal or monetary attempts to influence the price level, causing a time lag that makes it impossible to influence inflation rates in the desired way. We propose that the Central Bank of Brazil increases interest rates, thereby decreasing the money supply of the country. This will allow the inflation rate to decrease, making a better exchange rate with foreign countries. This, in turn, will stimulate more trade and allow Brazil to become more globalized, stimulating the economy. Obviously, this is easier said than done due to the time lag in both Brazil's fiscal and monetary policies. Lastly, though Brazil has already imported over 11,000 doctors to Cuba and plans to open its first biotech facility in 2017, to make significant progress, we propose that Brazil take action in demonstrating its commitment to easing immigration policy. To encourage potential immigrants, it must reduce its restrictions on visas, lower application fees, lighten requirements on paperwork, and grant access to family members of the immigrants. Through the combination of policy that increases interest rates and decreases inflation, with policies such as immigration reform that encourages skilled workers to enter the country, Brazil can start on its path to globalization, which will ease its way out of the current recession.